Alright, everybody, for today's critical thought, we're going to be talking about the topic of difficulty scaling in game design, or how do you properly build your game around multiple skill levels, not just the incredibly casual players or the hardcore, but everyone in between. And difficulty design is a very hard thing to cover, no pun intended. When it comes to a lot of video games, designers tend to work better with the extremes. Either making a super casual, uber kid friendly game that anyone can play to the point that you don't even need to focus on the game and you'll still win, or the super challenging min max, only 5% of the players who will ever play your game will be able to see it through to the end. And when it comes to difficulty design along those two extremes, it is very easy to do. The most popular way to scale difficulty for most games and their designs is stat manipulation, i.e., tweaking enemy and player values either up or down depending on the difficulty. Now, I am not a big fan of that, because you're not really changing how the game is played or tailoring it, you're more or less just raising or lowering a safety net, or the number of times a player can fail. Here's an example. In the first Nier, not Nier Automata, but the first one, the difference between normal and hard was on normal difficulty, enemies would take 7 hits, enemies could hit you 7 times before you would die, and you only need to hit them twice. On hard mode, they literally reverse that. Enemies, if they hit you twice at full health, you're dead, and you have to hit them 7 times per enemy to kill them. Now, again, that's not really changing how the game is played. It's just making it so you have to be a lot more careful. And for many video games, designers, again, try to go to those extremes. One thing that I'm also not a big fan of is the quote-unquote story mode that a lot of RPG designers make use of, including BioWare, and I think even like Persona 5 may have had something along those lines, wherein easy mode is basically you don't need to play the game at all, essentially. Everything is so tuned either up on your end or down for the enemies that you can just basically make any choice and you will most likely win. Now, defenders of this will say that this is a way for anyone to play the game to experience the story. But my counter argument is the point of this game is to play the game. And it seems more like I'm trying to think of a good term here. It seems more like an excuse not to focus on game design or game balance when you know everyone can just tilt the difficulty down to story mode and not have to worry about it. When it comes to good difficulty scaling for video games, there's 2 major criteria I think have to be at work here. First is that the game should be designed for as wide of an audience as possible. Again, not just the beginners or the experts, but everyone in between. But the other part, and where most developers tend to mess up on, is creating a difficulty system that motivates and rewards the player for getting better at the game. And that is the tricky part when it comes to good difficulty scaling. Because how do you make your game, or how do you make it so you want someone to raise the difficulty? And there are different ways and there's different philosophies when it comes to scaling your difficulty up or down. But before we talk about that, it's important to bring in another design term that I like to use, and that is the baseline. The baseline for a video game is the absolute bare minimum that the player needs or has to understand in order to beat your game. And depending upon the genre, this can mean different things. For an RPG, this could be the minimal level or minimum number of stats you need to have to beat the final boss. For an action game, it could be understanding 5 of the 7 different ways to move around. And again, we can keep going down the line. But the point is that once your baseline has been established, that is your average. That is the line that if someone can't get good enough at your game to cross, don't expect them to beat the game at all. And again, for most video games, the baseline will always be lower than the actual expert or even moderate level of play. Because again, you want the baseline to be low to give as many people a chance at playing your game. Now, that said, of course, again, the baseline means different things for different designs. Super Mario Galaxy's baseline is probably on the lower, or is going to be lower compared to something like Bloodborne, or Dark Souls, or Hotline Miami. Well, that last one could be a debate in of itself. But when we talk about the baseline, we are excluding post-game or optional content. As we've talked about before, many games, especially RPGs, love to throw in a super secret optional boss fight that's like 10 to 15 times harder than the actual final boss of the game. And again, that kind of stuff we're not going to be factoring into this discussion. We are talking about from beginning to end what the player is going through to see the ending credits of your game. Now, with the concept of the baseline, this is how you can start to approach things from the scaling of the difficulty. Like we said, when it comes to difficulty scaling, it's all about what you're expecting out of the player. If I'm playing your game on the casual, super easy setting, then I should be given a very wide berth in terms of how I play and what I need to know. On the other hand, if I'm playing on super hard difficulty, then I expect the game to be pulling out all the stops. But again, though, there is a limit to how hard or how easy you want to make a game, and if we have time, we'll talk about that in this video. If not, we'll bring that up in another vlog. But when it comes to creating that difficulty scale, it depends on the game. But one example that I really liked was from the developers of Action Hank. It was, I believe, Rage Squid. I spoke to one of the designers about, I think it was 2.5, 3 years ago. And what they talked about was, in order to come up with the different time trials that basically reward you depending upon how fast you get through each level, they basically set different restrictions for whoever was playing the game and that was recording the time. So, let's say the bronze trophy, the lowest you have to play the game, the designer who was doing the ghost record basically restricted himself from using any and all advanced mechanics. So it's just him running from right or left to right, not really optimizing, not really using any of the advanced tactics that they teach the player, and just getting through the level that way. And that's fine, because this is the bronze, this is the lowest challenge. And then at silver, they say, okay, now I'm going to start to optimize my run. I'm going to start making use of advanced maneuvers like jumping up inclines and holding down on declines. And we're going to record that time. And then the gold one is basically them pulling out the majority of the stops. And then there's one difficulty higher, one reward, I think it's like the Rainbow Trophy, and that's basically developer playing at the most optimized way that they can reasonably do it. And the point is, depending upon your own skill level, you're going to make progress in Ancient Hank. But by watching the ghost performing on the higher settings, you start to pick up the advanced ways of playing the game, and this will grow your own understanding and hopefully let you get better at the game to the point where you can start earning those additional trophies. And that is a really good form of difficulty scaling. Because again, the baseline for the game, I think, is just beat the game on bronze, and that unlocks the levels. But if you want the higher challenges and the higher rewards, you need to get the gold. Now, another game that did this was Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. This is one of my all-time favorites, and if I can ever figure out some way to get it streaming, or if it ever comes to the PC, I would love to show it to you. But in Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, every challenge in the game is built on 3 different tiers of rewards. Again, bronze, silver, and gold. And what the developers did, again, was come up with a very rough set of guidelines for what they expect out of each tier. And there's a pretty wide margin between the bronze and the silver tier. Bronze is basically just get through the level. We don't care if you built the best vehicle, we don't care if you're in first place, just get through it in a fairly reasonable amount of time, you get the bronze. Silver is, okay, now we want you to actually start paying attention. We want you to design a vehicle that's either good enough or maximizes a challenge, or we want your skill to be good. And then gold is basically saying, now we want you to be at your best. We expect you to have a perfect grasp of this level, and we want you to have a vehicle specifically tailored to it. And again, for the novice players, they're going to get through the game. They're going to get every bronze trophy, they'll get to the end, and 1, 2, 3, we get the happy ending, game over. But you're still rewarding expert players with getting additional challenges and maybe unlocking more parts and areas by getting these silver and gold trophies. And this is how you can motivate players through difficulty scaling, either by providing a reward to incentivize them by going up from easy to medium and medium to hard, or you simply change how the game is played or give them a reason to try and grow and learn their skill. It's the ever popular example of, okay, I beat the game on bronze in 10 minutes, but now the game is teasing me saying, well, if I beat it in 8.5 minutes, I'll get the silver reward. And then once I beat that, the gold reward could be 7 minutes. And it's that ever popular idea of you just keep challenging the player. Now, we spent about 10 minutes talking about difficulty scaling in terms of avoiding just pure stat manipulation. But there are some examples when this can work, and that's when it radically changes the decision making behind the game. And a really good example of this kind of difference in difficulty scaling comes from XCOM Enemy Unknown and, of course, XCOM 2. Now, when we talked about XCOM in the Dissecting Design, Firaxis made some very radical changes to the foundation of XCOM. The original XCOM series was built on hard numbers and, of course, the RPG layer of how everything interacted. With XCOM and XCOM 2, Firaxis streamlined things down to more board game rules. And it still delivers the tense gameplay. But here's what they did. In XCOM, and we're just going to focus on the first game for right now. In the first XCOM Enemy Unknown, there are 4 difficulty levels. And again, we don't need to know their names. We'll just call them easy, normal, hard, and expert. Now, regardless of the difficulty level you're playing at, your basic weapon, the assault rifle, does the same amount of damage. It will do about, I think, 3 to 4 points of damage, and then the chance to crit may take it up to 5 or 6. So on easy and normal difficulty, the very first enemy type you run into will have 3 points of health. So what that essentially means is when you're playing on easy and normal, as long as you score and hit on an enemy, you're going to kill it in 1 hit. And in a game when you start with only having 4 characters you can interact with per match or per round, getting a kill is very important. Now when you go up to hard difficulty, now the starting enemy has 4 points of health. And that 1 point difference changes how your strategy works, because it's no longer a 100% chance to kill an enemy if you get a hit. It's now 50-50. Either you'll get or actually I'm not even sure what the percentage chance of damage is there. But if you hit an enemy who has 4 health and they have 3 points, and you only do 3 points of damage, you now need to get a second hit on another character in order to kill that one enemy. And again, that is huge for a game that's dealing with small numbers of enemies and, of course, small numbers of actions per turn. And then on the expert level, the hardest setting in XCOM, all the starting enemies now have 5 points of health. So what that essentially means is, even if you score a hit, you will not be guaranteed a kill. You will need to get at least 2 hits on an enemy to guarantee them to die, or get incredibly lucky with a critical shot. So what this does is, even though we are dealing with stat manipulation in terms of raising enemy values, this is actually impacting the game strategy. You can't do YOLO strategies anymore of send your one squaddy way out over there and try to get that kill on an enemy, because the chance of that happening is now less and less. This also brings into the equation making use of advanced tactics, such as using Overwatch and hunkering down. Now, with that said though, I don't think Firaxis did a good enough job of explaining the advanced maneuvers in XCOM, but that's a topic for another time. But the point is, even though we are just raising values in XCOM, there is a fundamental difference in how you approach playing XCOM on normal versus hard, or I'm sorry, normal versus expert. No, I was right the first time. Normal versus hard, and then hard versus expert. And that is a very great point of difficulty scaling. The game is changing depending upon what difficulty you're playing as. Now, with that said, though, you're not really being rewarded in the sense that the game's giving you, special units or weapons. It's more on the player's side, saying, oh, you beat the game on normal, can you do it on hard? Or you beat the game on hard, can you do it at the highest setting? And again, having those kinds of differences between the different difficulty settings is a great way to motivate someone to learn, while also keeping things from getting completely out of control. And that's another major point I think we'll wrap up this video on. Another importance of difficulty scaling is to make sure that the player is the players playing the game at their skill level. You don't want an expert player being forced to play the game on easy, just as you don't want someone brand new forced to play the game on hard mode. This is the major point of difficulty scaling. If I'm a brand new player, I don't want to get hit with everything right from the get-go. But if I've played every game in the series and I'm playing the latest one, don't baby me. And good difficulty scaling, again, should allow for as wide of a margin of players and their different skill levels to enjoy your game without one group either being held back or another group being dragged by their collar forward. Now, with that said, though, we're going to wrap it up here, and my question for you folks watching, or I have two. For the consumers watching this video right now, can you think of really great examples of difficulty scaling? As in either providing a meaningful reward to motivate you to play the game on a hard setting, or one that managed to make each difficulty level feel different enough so that everyone is basically being catered to. And for developers watching this, how do you approach difficulty in your game? What kind of criteria do you think about when designing your title? Are you making a game for casual fans? Are you making it for the super hardcore? And then how do you tweak things from easy, normal, and whatever you want to do? Let me know in the comments below, but thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you have any suggestions for vlogs in the future, and check back daily for more discussions on game design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and come back nightly around 10 Eastern for regular game streams. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game design topics, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. You can follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates from me throughout the day. And be sure to check out our Patreon campaign. You can find us on Patreon under GWBycer for ways to not only support Game Wisdom, but you can get access to our Discord channel where we'll talk game design topics, as well as allow you to vote for our Saturday night grab bag stream. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the next video here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.